Yeah. Want a walkie-talkie?
Nice.
Yeah. That was fun.
Yeah, one of the things that came to mind is having seen you perform and your setup of over the years. I was curious how you felt about, because I guess before this you had the Manta or whatever, so it was a similar flat rectangle. But I wonder, I've not really played on much, but how haptic the little nibbins are, or versus like how do you feel performing when you have to look at your thing as intently as you have to?
No, I know. I mean, it's obviously a problem. It's especially a problem. It's especially a problem for like chamber music, where like you have to look up. I think for improvisation, it's not so much of a problem. I think it allows a certain kind of multiplicity of objects that I can, I have access to so many different things, and because the screens can change, I have access to so many different things. So that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
Is with that, all these, bounty of things. The trade-off is that it's not physical in a way that this is, right? Whereas I don't have to look at this. I just kind of reach for it, and or even this, or even these buttons. Oh yeah, I muted myself. Ooh, hot. Yeah, those buttons, like, I don't have to really even think about them, and I can touch them. So yeah, those are great. So I think trying to bring all of these things into it is trying to make up for the fact that you really do have to look at the iPads and they're not physical.
Yeah, I mean, how physical was the Manta in that way? Like, I mean, I guess things were mapped to where they're mapped, so you could know your way around. But like, could you feel the like? Not
really. I mean, there's ridges, but it's not. Yeah. It's not super. You still have to look at it.
Yeah. Really, it's not like you're not braille fingertips where you
No, yeah. So, but it has like a little. There's definitely some tactile element, but yeah, but yeah.
And I mean, because you do have big iPads.
Yes.
But small displays. I mean, I guess it's like you want the cake, but then it's a matter of I guess trying to eat it as well. Like the you've made decisions about having access to all of these things.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's also that if something goes wrong with one of these, and I'm on tour, I can get one.
All right, yeah.
Anywhere in the world, and just walk down the street, and I can get a replacement. And the cables, it's this ubiquitous cable, and so there's that. I mean, same thing with this. I mean, you can order this on Amazon and have it in 2 days. Really, it's like a joystick. These are a little less so, but this is also maybe a less vital part of my playing. But I think that's actually the main thing. There's two things: being able to travel. This setup fits in a suitcase. I don't have to check it. It's overhead in any airplane, and then the main things that I really need, like I can just play with the iPads. The main things I really need are replaceable in most cities in the world. So I think that there's that, and not that that's super important if you're not on tour, but if you are, like it's really it makes you feel a little bit better. I've definitely built my own controllers, and I just didn't think that they had they weren't rugged enough, but also, if it broke, then I'd be screwed. So I think that's just a choice that I've made, that like as a designer or whatever, I focus on software, and then having the expression of that this instrument provides me. I mean, what hardware controller has had the billions of dollars that have gone into the development of this product, right? None. So
violin.
What's that?
Violin, maybe.
Right. Exactly. That's why it's stuck around. So yeah, I think that's a trade-off, and I've chosen to go with what might seem like a lame trade-off, but for me it works.
I mean, it wasn't a question of judgment. It was more because I've not played on Manta, so I don't know how eyes closable that was versus this. So
not eyes closable, but like the physicalness of it is greater.
Yeah.
Whereas these are really buttons and faders, and they're buttons and faders with no tactile feedback at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering there with that duo, like, what I really liked is like, a lot of the processes you're doing, I have similar ones, right? And so, I mean, you know, there's only so many things you can do, but but then it's like, wait, who's doing?
Yeah.
Were you doing that, or was I doing that? Were you having that experience too?
Yeah,
or?
for sure. I mean, I was able to hear, because there's some decisions like for let's say like that micro loopy stuttery thing.
Yeah.
Mine there's, at least with this implementation, there's no dynamic variation to it.
Right.
Whereas yours does.
Right.
So I was able to, like, there were moments where we had both of them going, but yours, has a low, and I was like, okay, I could differentiate them that way. But there were overlaps of processing, which is interesting, because it's not massively unusual to play with someone else with electronics.
Yeah.
You know, but usually each person has a rough wheelhouse. I mean, when our blippy bloops, I'd be harder pressed to pick out whose blips and bloops or whose.
Yeah.
But the processing stuff, definitely I think we share some aesthetic appreciation of a sonic world.
It's not just a sonic world, but it's also like the onset detection thing that I played with drums a lot. So then it's like doing that, and you're doing onset detection. Yeah. At least you're triggering sounds that maybe aren't your drums.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, for this bit, it was nothing. It was just the live processing.
Oh, okay, so then then we're both using the same sound as our onset. So what's the noisy synth you're doing? Like,
so I had a couple. I have two synths. So this is doing stuff where I have the fader, and then depending on where I am and changing direction, I send CV to multiple places. So I'll have like one synth. This is a Rungler one. It's kind of a digitally Runglery kind of space. Yeah. And then the other one is Siet Lombard Quantussi. So it's sort of 5 intertwined oscillators that co-modulate.
Yeah.
So it's more analog. And can end up in a little bit more patterny world sometimes. And I'm also doing whenever I change direction, because each one of these synth voices has multiple outputs. So either whether it's the sawtooth or the square wave, or multiple taps of each of these oscillators. So every time I change direction, it remaps a certain amount of these. So it basically selects a new set of outputs. Yeah. So regardless of what the CV is doing, when I change direction, it's just new outputs, new outputs, new outputs. So it has an effect of so kind of every direction change shuffles sound. Yeah. So those two, like, one is digitally-ish, one is analog-ish. Yeah. Both are synthy, blippy, bloopy, and fasty gesture. Yeah. And some of it was inspired by, like, specifically like the hearing, like what you were doing with the regression mapping stuff. Yeah. This is not doing the regression mapping. It's more doing the CV going to multiple places and remushing CV around.
Right. I mean, we were talking about earlier about how, like, the regression mapping or the thinking about data sets, like, has influenced, like, thinking in general about how we're thinking about data. Like this very similar thing, except it's predictable. Why am I playing that so loud? Oh, I see why.
So, like, the same button presses will engage the same preset. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I can go back and forth between those things. But then this one is very similar to what you're doing. It's like I have no control. Like, every time I press, it's in a different world, and I can sometimes adjust that world, and sometimes So that's one time where I could, and then that account I can't.
Yeah.
and then here's my 4 oscillators feeding back into each other. Yeah. So slightly different, but same idea. Yeah.
But I mean, I think there's a shared ethos there, which I think I've heard you talk about before, of gesture, communicating gesture. Yeah. And the sonic vehicle of that, like, isn't necessarily always the direct one-to-one, so the same gesture will produce the same sound, right? But the same gesture will produce a corresponding sonic gesture in a way that I think we probably both value the communication of gesture, but not necessarily the, like, it's this exact same gesture.
I think I value it so much that I forget sometimes that I don't need to make a gesture. Like, right. I mean, especially like this synth is, it's like 50 filters feeding back, and like some of them are so like
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything, and it's really active. So so I think sometimes I will be over gesturizing because I do that, but I forget. Oh, I can just stop and listen to this thing because it's doing something really cool.
To ask a semi-technical, semi-tangent from that, how do you relate to slewing in these contexts? So specifically with the joystick one, where I feel it's like a big thing. Like the what you set the slew, particularly with a chaotic system, really has a big shape on the way sounds move in a gestural context.
Well, there's no. You mean like slewing the signal, like slowing it down?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got X amount of steps, so we're not hearing beep.
Oh yeah.
Like
right. Everything's every parameter is being
like smooth.
Is being smooth.
But is it always the same?
I think so. I don't think I'm doing too much to that.
Yeah.
Because it's like you're dealing with like this synth has like 50 parameters. So I'm not sure, if there's 50 parameters that are being smoothed a little bit, just so that you don't feel steppy with it, then. So I do have other situations where like every time, and I'm not sure. I've definitely done this, so it could be in play. Where like every time I move to a place, it'll go to a slightly different variation of that place. So if there's 50 parameters and they're all going to these 50 different random numbers, 50 different numbers where like this is, then when it gets to here, there'll be those numbers, but they'll all be
like plus, minus,
a little bit of noise in there.
Yeah.
And that's that adds a little bit of chaos to the system that I think is really fun.
Yeah, I agree. Like I just asked one because I do not obsess, but I massage that parameter quite a bit.
Yeah.
In controller-based stuff specifically. So with this and with other, particularly with the joystick one, where a lot of the gamepad-based stuff, it's 16-bit, so you got a pretty big resolution on the analog sticks. So there's a lot of there where you don't need to smooth so much, but the amount that you choose to smooth will set a vocabulary.
Oh, totally.
Of your gesture, like any smoothing, so it's something that I feel like I can hear to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And I mean, this isn't the case with your iPad-based setup, but sometimes when people have like big 2D grids of like kind of iPad control, I feel like I could hear data slew more than the sounding result, because I think people thoughtlessly will just like do it and everything's like it sounds like just theremins just like super smooth.
I think that is also why I developed these synths that don't do that, like don't slew, because I got so for a long time I was doing this regressor stuff that's like very sloopy, and it's all. It's like transformation of sound stuff. Well, I don't want that in everything, and then having it. Is this going to be like super loud again?
Yeah, like
just being able to be on off.
Yeah.
And adding like a binary on off kind of thing.
Another thing that like just because of the way that we're situated here and your setup and all that, I noticed your feet are free.
Yeah.
Have you like?
Yeah, I don't ski, and I don't rollerblade, and I don't roller skate.
Yeah.
I don't skateboard. I'm bad at soccer.
Okay.
So anything, well, let's anything that like involves lower body coordination, I just don't do. So I think it's just I don't tend towards engaging my feet.
Yeah.
Maybe I should. I mean, I think it would probably take a lot of practice, but I think it could be really interesting.
I mean, it's one that was funky for me because coming from playing guitar, I mean, you have pedals and like that's a common use thing.
Yeah.
But and even as drums, like you're using your feet, like it's half your limbs in that context. But something about footless drums, as in like not having a kick or mic here, that it doesn't feel. I mean, I at the moment I don't, but I have had pedal stuff at the bottom.
Yeah.
But for some reason with drums, it feels less a thing. It could also be that there's Like normally when you're playing guitar, there's fucking from here down, there's nothing.
Yeah.
So you not that you need to see your feet a lot, but like there's line of sight.
Yeah.
Whereas here there's objects, and I have to,
Right.
do a little bit of this to.
Yeah,
to
I mean,
get
I have
around.
a table.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I wonder if that's also it.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, one thing I found very fruitful, I mean, for myself with some of the feedback stuff, you have so many outputs that it probably wouldn't be as useful, but, like having a master volume
Yeah.
kind of thing, but
Totally.
specifically for the feedback, because sometimes I could write it here, but sometimes it's nice to write it there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would maybe sound, and I'll ask your opinion on this. In like hearing an electronic performance, I personally don't like the sound of it's like noisy or whatever, and then hearing the master volume drop a couple dB, or someone like they're like, oh shit, that was too hot, and then, but then everything just drops like in
yeah,
a.
no, I that'll happen sometimes, when I'm playing and I don't want it to, and I'm so upset. I'm sure no one else cares. Maybe if you were there, you would care. But like, I'm so upset, and like, it just I'll be playing and make, whatever, and I'll accidentally like, and I was like, oh man, what? But and that's actually a criticism I would have of the iPads is that like sometimes it can be really hard to get a nice fade out, and that's why I added these. I added this controller because it's got all these buttons, and then it has all these faders, and they're physical faders, and then sometimes that's what I want. I think I put the main volume back on the iPads just because it's actually more convenient where it is. But yeah, some of these things have physical. I wanted these like physical faders.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to carry around a Behringer BCF 2000, which was awesome and had flying faders, and like I'd go to a different setting and it would just like changing. It was just like carrying that thing. You can't get it on an airplane.
Yeah.
Or it made the touring such a pain. This one
Not
thing.
even bus powered either. It's like it had wall power. No?
It had wall power.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. So I mean, a lot of the decisions I've made, like that one, are really just pragmatic. It's just really practical decisions about like I loved that thing, but like I couldn't really justify it making travel so difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if you felt this. You are on airplanes a lot. But like when I was in the Midwest, the Midwest is like sprawling, and I had a car and I could put all my stuff in the car. And my setup was like, I remember doing a setup and it was like 2 tables. I had like 2 full tables, and then I was like, what am I doing? And as a New Yorker at heart in a lot of ways, then I tried to pare it down to this thing that I can fit in one suitcase. So it's that pragmatism that ends up making a lot of decisions.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the sort of snare de jour or whatever, like using people's things, it definitely changed that. Because sometimes I can travel with a snare, but it's doesn't easily fit in a carry-on with anything else. That's kind of like the whole carry-on as your drum. I mean, I do have some shallower drums, and I have done that on occasion, but it's I've just resigned myself using what you have, which is its own thing, and pianists, I guess, experience that a lot. But yeah, so some of the controller choices, all of these are small. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm sticking them on the drum, so they tend to be on the smaller side. But some of the foot pedal thing that I have is small. Like a lot of that stuff gets in the mix in terms of travel. I had a big shift where in part of my setup, I was doing things where I was modifying my acoustic drums. So like my tom had speakers built into it and a synth and this kind of weird shit. And I was going to build some solenoids into a kick drum and all this stuff. And then I started doing more gigs, like international stuff. And it was like, okay, that's just something I can't do anymore.
No, totally.
I mean, it's cool and all, and I have some shit like that at home, but it's not international giggable.
Exactly.
Easily, unless you become really, really big or something. But so some of that considerations became more about, okay, I can have any old snare, stick my things to it, and be more or less ready to go.
Yeah,
sometimes you get weird stuff and you have to adapt. But that stuff, it's interesting how it comes into play because I wouldn't say I'm typically a pragmatic person.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between I can just take a normal flight or I need to check a bag.
Totally.
Like those are very different things in a way that it's a footprint enough that it's like it's worth having to think about.
Right. And I know people who are very particular about the PA setup and all that stuff. And it's like, I just got so used to playing in basements that like, I don't care. Like this thing could be like that and I could barely hear myself and we're just going to have to go with it. We're going to have to roll. And I think, it comes with like, having to deal with deal with it.
Yeah, that one, I mean, I have very little say on the fussiness of it, but it does impact my setup a lot more, particularly the feedback-oriented things.
Sure.
Because, I mean, proximity to a speaker, the kind of speaker it is, and all that stuff really radically changes the nature of the instrument in a way that, for a sound, like, is not a remediable. Like, I'm not going to sit here and do some impulse responses and tune the room. Like, it's like, okay, it's. I'll just aim the speaker away a bit, and we'll be fine now.
Yeah.
But in a circumstance where these are fixed, and I'm sat here, like that, really, this will become a very different instrument for this during our performance, in a way that, I can't do too much about that. It's interesting how those as I said, I'm not like a pragmatic, like, oh, you do the, but it does manifest in some things like that. Yeah.
Want to do it again?
Let's do it.
All right.
If you'd like to support the making of these videos, please join our Patreon. The link is in the description below. Thanks for watching.